Good afternoon. It's great to be in your company. We'll start this hour on a rather distressing note, but important to have the conversation. You will have seen a 4-year-old child has been taken to a place of safety after a video went viral on social media this week showing his mother allegedly placing a bottleneck with a lit Mandrex dose, placing that in the child's mouth and him subsequently inhaling it. The video has since sparked outrage across the country, as you can imagine. The mother, along with 3 other people, have since appeared in court to face charges of attempted murder and child abuse, and their case has been postponed to next week. Let's go deeper then on this story and the themes that it brings forward around child abuse and neglect of children. I'm joined by Dr. Shahida Omar, who is Clinical Director at the Teddy Bear Foundation, Stanley Malimacha, a child and human rights lawyer, and in studio I'm joined by Rock Wilson, who is an associate at the digital law company, to talk about the impact of that, as well as social media, how it fits into the mix. Before we get into this, I'll show you the video, but we've sort of taken precaution because it comes with a warning for sensitive viewers, because it does, as you can imagine, involve issues and themes of child abuse. So as I start the conversation and we show you that video, let me bring in my guests. Let me start with a broad reaction from all 3 of you. Dr. Omar, let me start with you. Just when you saw this video, what was your immediate thinking and the themes and issues that it brings to the fore around the care and neglect of children?
Well, I think that my immediate reaction was horror, disbelief, shock that this cannot be happening. This is a little child, a toddler, who is powerless, who is helpless, who is at the mercy of adults. So it was absolutely soul-destroying, heart-wrenching, and very disturbing. Yeah. Absolutely disturbing and distressing that a child has been objectified, and the kind of unacceptable, unlawful, unethical behavior has actually been normalized for this child. That totally sent goosebumps and shivers in my body.
Yeah. And Stanley, same question for you. Just your overall reaction. Child protection is within your domain on a day-to-day basis. That's what you do. What did you immediately think when you saw that video?
Thanks, Tulasa, and good afternoon to the viewers and my fellow panelists. As Dr. Shahida said, that video is very disturbing, and one quickly just, looks at the Children's Act and say, how does it define care? Care, it's defined as, ensuring that the best interests of the child are catered for, including the child's well-being, and ensuring that you don't put a child in a situation that is harmful either to the physique of the child, mentally or emotionally. So it is really disturbing to see someone who is entrusted with the care of a toddler, introducing or putting the child's life in danger, so deliberate, and even filming it for the world to see how we have normalized abuse as society, how our morals have eroded to such a point that we are no longer protecting children, but we are the ones who are harming them on a daily basis. So it is really disturbing, and we need a change of attitude.
So, Rock, let me bring you in as well, in studio. Rock Wilson, you work with the digital law company, and again, you also in the space, and we saw you recently, and we'll touch on it a bit later on, active in a court case about child sexual abuse material. When you saw this, it's not sexual abuse, but it is a kind of abuse of a child. What themes did it bring forward to you, particularly with it coming to the fore in the manner that it did through social media?
I mean, frankly, at the risk of being repetitive, it just my first response was just, oh, not again. There's a lot of bad news on right now, and to just see another thing piled on top of that was horrific. But yeah, just once more that theme of the neglect of this child and the total just lack of concern for them, and then as well how quickly that was spread. I mean, I can't help but think that we are complicit in many ways in these things, that they wouldn't go viral if so many of us wouldn't be so willing to rush to and see what was going on there.
Yeah.
I understand it's like a car crash, you know, you sometimes can't look away, but sometimes it's the audience, I think, that allows some of these things to proliferate in the way it does.
Yeah. In fact, let me stick with you then, Rock. Now that you bring that up, a lot of people grappled with that. You see this video. Do you retweet? I don't know if they still call it that. Re-X, or do you reshare it on Facebook and the other platforms, or do you look at it and you are horrified and you walk away? There was that debate that says if not many people had shared it, it would not have reached those who could do something about it. How do we grapple with that exploitation of the child in the social media space, digital media space on the one hand, but on the other hand, agitation for some kind of response to be brought to the situation?
I mean, it's a really difficult question, especially when you consider the legal framework around it. We work with something in South Africa called the chain of publication, which says anyone who has a hand in putting a media to a broader audience can be held legally responsible for it. So in cases like this, not only do you risk re-traumatizing the person who is in that video and potentially furthering that harm, depending on what you are resharing, you could put yourself in legal liability as well. So especially when you're sharing these kinds of things, if you're doing it to share disgust, you must make it abundantly clear that you're sharing it in disgust. But beyond that, like you said, would it have been would anything have been done about this if it hadn't been shared so widely? I would hope so. I would hope that one or two people need to have seen it online and made the correct reports in order for something to be done. But I know that isn't always the nature of law enforcement in South Africa, and sometimes we do need to make a big stink about something to get things moving. Yeah.
Dr. Shaheeda Omar, let me come back to you. In terms of society and all of society approach to the care of children, what about that video says to you that, as typical in many of these cases, the signs were there of child abuse, or should have been there? Someone should have noticed, someone at the school, someone who interacts with the child in a health context and the likes, should have been, at least had an inkling that abuse may be possible in this instance.
So you are absolutely correct when we talk about a whole of society approach if we want to protect children. However, I think if we're just looking at the context and the landscape of the community that we are focusing on, which is surrounded by violence, the order and norm of the day is shooting and killing, rife with gangsterism. People are living in absolute fear and panic, and children, young children, join gangs. They go along to get along, to protect themselves and protect their families. So having this kind of expectation from the community members, yes, that would be first prize, and that is what we expect if we want to protect children. But we also need to understand the underlying currents and dynamics of this community where substance abuse, violence, and violence begets violence. So people are fighting for survival, and that is what we need to understand. However, I think we need to commend and applaud this community for having taken action and ensuring that this child who was in need of care, who has been at risk, has been removed and placed in alternate care in this place of safety. But just the exposure of the video, I want to just add to that. I think I know Rock spoke about that, but I think there's a lot, the normalizing and sensationalizing, it's adding an element of gravity, and no sane, sober, sound or rational mind or a person in a mentally healthy state could subject or exploit a toddler to that kind of conduct, because what they've done constitutes, as we know, they're charged for child abuse, but it's also sending a very strong message to people out there. We would find that other substance abusers would find a thrilling, exhilarating experience that would subject more children to this kind of torture, exploitation, and crime against humanity. So, and of course, I think the other facet of this is also the vicarious trauma that it has induced in many other people.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not having exposure to debriefing or not knowing what to do. But just to end on that note, to say that as a community, we all need to stand up, speak out, break the cycle of abuse if we want to ensure the safety and protection of all children.
Stanley, please come in here and maybe at a systemic level. Is enough being done in terms of the systems to enable people who encounter incidents such as the one that we are discussing to be able to do something about it and be assured that there will be a response, that the system will be responsive? In this instance, as Dr. Omar points out, it was responsive in that the child was taken to a place of safety. But is that guaranteed in terms of how we've laid out the infrastructure that we have, in terms of insisting on takedowns, which Rock will talk to in a moment, takedowns where a child's exploitation is taken to the digital space?
No, thanks, Tulas. You know, I think, look, I think one, we must really applaud the fact that the child has been declared to be in need of care protection in terms of Section 150 of the Children's Act, and therefore placed in a place of safety. Another thing, what the Children's Act actually does is that under Section 46, it makes provisions for orders that may be ordered or granted by the court. And in this situation, apart from the criminal prosecution, I think it is very important that this woman, be ordered to undergo parenting skills, and also professional counseling. Because you know what this video also shows, right? These are two vulnerable people. We can't shy away from the fact that women are also included as the most vulnerable people in our society. And the drugs are a social phenomenon. So this person actually on herself as well, she needs help. And I think it will be very important that an order be granted that she undergoes professional counseling and that she be, provided with parenting classes. Now, insofar as the ability and the readiness of the system to be able to provide such orders, that is another question on its own. Do we have, enough services out there to ensure that parents who are struggling with parenting can be provided those parenting skills? And I think that's where we really need to strengthen those mechanisms where existing, and if there are any gaps, we need to make sure that we close those gaps. And I think also this video, Tulas, if I can just end on this note, I think what this video shows us is also that, we really need continuous, I think we need some strong advocacy around parenting, around child protection. It mustn't be, we must not be reactionary when we see such videos. Yes. I think it's something that needs to be ongoing. Yeah. We must not say, or maybe settle with the fact that all people who have actually are capable of taking care of it. We need social interventions to really deal with this kind of issues.
Dr. Omar, let me bring you back in simply because of a point that Stanley brings up in that last response, where he talks about the vulnerability of the mother as well. And I'd like you to talk to that. Do we grapple with that enough as a society when we see instances like these ones, such as the disappearance of Jocelyn Smith, the disappearance and the case involving Jaden Lee Meek, just all of those issues? Do we take that into account as a society, or should we? Because usually the outrage is then directed at what kind of a parent does this. Do we grapple with that vulnerability that Stan talks about, as well as being responsive to the societal issues that you were talking to a few minutes ago?
So thank you for that very, very important question. I think if we just look at the risk factors, what we are seeing is the lack of access to social services, social grants, the stigma that is attached and associated with mental illness, and therefore people not seeking any kind of help when they are not in a mentally healthy state. I think that's something that we have to be aware of. If we look at perinatal postpartum depression, psychosis, schizophrenia, personality disorders, mood disorders like depression, generalized anxiety, those are all risk factors, but also looking at gender-based violence, particularly intimate partner violence, where we find sometimes children are being killed, the altruistic filicide that we know, where mothers kill their children for the benefit, they think they're protecting their children from further harm and danger, and kill themselves. And then revenge filicide, where it's, getting back or a vengeance against the partner. And then pathological, as I spoke about, mental illness. Now, we know that not all cases of abuse, murder, brutalization is as a result of mental illness, but a significant percentage, as I mentioned earlier, that a mentally healthy person would not resort to this kind of behavior. And we know with substances, it affects the brain, it affects the functioning, the cognitive abilities to make sound decisions. So again, we have to look at that mental health should become a public health priority. That we should destigmatize mental health, and ensure that people have access to all kinds of resources, counseling. I think Stanley spoke about that, but how easily available and accessible is it? That is something. And again, if we look at this community, the lack of resources, the infrastructure is actually so disappointing. Children don't even have areas to play, to be free, to grow, thrive, and develop. And even for the mothers, for families, opportunities are limited.
All right. Rock, let me give you the final word there. So this played itself out on social media, and you and I have discussed the elements of exploitation of children. Talk to that point about the systems that we have in place, the legal systems, takedown orders. I saw people commenting about content. Content creation will be the end of us. But behind that, where children are involved in these scenarios like these, it is exploitation ultimately. How easy do the systems we have, or how difficult do they make it for takedown orders to be carried forward? You were involved, as you say, recently in a major case around that particular issue.
They make it, it's immensely difficult. On the one side, the platforms that this go down on are massive, and most of them will be based in California, where they hide behind something we call Section 230 immunity. That gives them the immunity to allow people to post whatever they want on there and not have any sort of legal responsibility moderation-wise. The excuse they use is, it's just too much for us to do, how can we stay on top of all of that? And then beyond that, in South Africa, our police are greatly under-resourced and underfunded. You've got a lot of police sitting without email addresses, so then can we expect them to have the kind of capabilities to take on cases like this and to issue the sorts of notices? So there's immense difficulty there, and then on top of that, these platforms frankly don't really care, especially in a country like South Africa, where the content isn't always in English. They don't have the resources to monitor properly what is actually being said and posted, and so we're failing our kids, frankly. It is so difficult to get any sort of meaningful takedown notice. I was working on a case about 3 weeks ago where a full frontal nude image of a child was put on an Instagram story, and that was up for 17 hours. You would expect them to at least have the sorts of technology that can spot that kind of image and have it automatically taken down.
Is there something we can do, though, given the experience you've had with that case against Meta that had to do with child sexual abuse materials? Is there something further we can do by way of, legislation, enforceable legislation, where we take a bold stance and we say, where it concerns our children, an image of me, yes, it will be distressing, but I have the wherewithal to know where to go to have it actioned and to agitate and to fight and to counter its propagation. A child just doesn't.
No, absolutely. So firstly, we need better legislation, but we also need better enforcement. At the start of it, all of these companies right now are playing by the rules of the game. And that rule of the game is to make their shareholders as much money as possible off the backs of us and our kids. So firstly, we need to change the rules of the game for them. But secondly, we need to enforce it better. We've got the Film and Publications Board, which is a part of an international child sexual abuse reporting hotline. However, when we went to report 3 weeks ago, the mass spreading of child sexual abuse material, the tool was down. I was returned a server runtime error. So it's one thing to have the rules in place, but it's another thing to then start implementing them and making sure that they can be enforced. And it's difficult when we're working with the resources and the systems in South Africa that we are right now.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for coming through. And I really appreciate your time this afternoon. That's Rock Wilson, who is from the Digital Law Company. And of course, just rounding off in this conversation, we were joined by Dr. Shahida Omar, who is Clinical Director of the Teddy Bear Foundation, as well as Stanley Malimacha, who is a child and human rights lawyer. Thank you for that conversation that we've had.